Did you know that the gang will actually ask you to run little errands around camp? And these companion requests are where you see the real human side of the Vanderlyn boys. Honestly, just do them. They're quick, they hand out genuinely useful loot, and they pile on an insane amount of depth before everything falls apart. After you take Little Jack fishing in Chapter 2, he'll mention he lost his favorite Penny Dreadful comic about brave knights. You can track one down at spots like Osmond Grove or Downs Ranch, and bringing it back earns you a small reward and a nice bump to your honor. Catch Dutch craving his pipe, and he'll send you way out to Vedder's Echo in West Elizabeth. Go with your gun already drawn because a grizzly bear is living inside that cabin and will maul you the second you step through that door. Clear it out, grab the pipe, and Dutch hands you a fresh set of spurs. Find Hosea making medicine, and he'll ask for 2 American ginseng, plus a crime book called The Shrew in the Fog, tucked away in a cabin down in the bayou near St. Denis. That ginseng nets you some potent medicine, and the book gets you predator bait. Once Sadie opens up, she'll mention she used to play the harmonica before everything burned down. Grab one off the shelf at the Granger's Hoggery, and she'll slip you some gun oil while warming up to you in a big way. Sit down for a few hands of poker with Pearson, and he'll mourn the naval compass his grandfather gave him. You can swipe it from the boathouse at Braithwaite Manor, where there's a cigarette card sitting right next to it, and he'll thank you with a bottle of rum. And if you linger by the campfire at night, Lenny will tell a gut-punching story about his father's stolen pocket watch. Find one out in the world or loot it off a stagecoach robbery, bring it back, and he'll hand you some dynamite. Most of these stay open from Chapter 2 all the way through Chapter 4, so knock them out before you ship off to Gorma, because that is the cutoff. It's easily the best way to feel the real brotherhood of the gang, while stacking your satchel along the way. While the rest of the world in Red Dead Redemption 2 is pretty much a desert, St. Denis offers a completely different look. And Rockstar obviously took some heavy inspirations in creating this beautiful city. It's a flawless, remarkably faithful recreation of turn-of-the-century New Orleans. And Rockstar didn't just capture the Big Easy vibe from 1899. They modeled specific, real-world landmarks right into the game. If you walk through the Central Park of St. Denis and stare up at the massive white St. Denis Basilica, you're literally looking at a direct copy of New Orleans' famous Jackson Square and St. Louis Cathedral. Places I had actually visited in real life, and when I found in the game, it was pretty astounding to see. When you ride your horse through these narrow cobblestone streets lined with ornate iron-wrought balconies, glowing glass lamps, and unique courtyard-style housing, you're riding straight through the historic Vieux Carre, also known as the French Quarter. If you venture into the upscale area where the mayor and the wealthy elite live, you're looking at the incredibly opulent mansions of the real-world Garden District, and the creepy City of the Dead with all those above-ground tombs is a perfect recreation of Lafayette Cemetery No. 1, which was an actual necessity in New Orleans because of the insanely high water table. But the crazy details go way beyond just the architecture, as St. Denis perfectly represents the tragic death of the Wild West through massive industrialization. The sudden appearance of paved roads, clanking streetcars, and bright electric lights is meant to contrast sharply with the muddy trails of Valentine or the freezing isolation of Coulter. The game also perfectly captures the unique cultural melting pot of the era, showcasing the massive French, Haitian, and Chinese influences that defined the city's identity. Even the Angelo Bront storyline is an incredible historical parallel, perfectly mirroring the real-life emergence of the Italian mafia in New Orleans during the late 19th century, which was actually one of the very first organized crime families in the entirety of the United States. So why didn't they just call it New Orleans? Well, just like Liberty City stands for New York City and Los Santos represents LA, using a fictional name gives Rockstar the creative freedom to alter the map layout while maintaining a sense of heightened reality. But here's an absolutely mind-blowing piece of development trivia. According to early development leaks, the city was originally supposed to be named New Bordeaux. Rockstar actually had to scramble and change the name to St. Denis late in the process because the game Mafia 3, which released shortly before RDR2, had already used the exact name New Bordeaux for their original own virtual version of New Orleans. If you ask me on one location that screams Red Dead right to your face, it's the Braithwaite Manor. And you realize this place has a history just as dark and dramatic as the game itself. Dating all the way back to roughly 1779, this gorgeous but sinister former slave plantation is first visited by Arthur Morgan in 1899 to play the middleman in a forbidden Romeo and Juliet style romance, secretly passing love letters between Penelope Braithwaite and her rival family lover, Beau Gray. As we all know, things escalate to madness from there, dragging the gang through stolen moonshine schemes, massive horse thefts, burning down the Gray's prized tobacco fields, and culminating in that absolute cinematic masterpiece of a gang assault. While Penelope and Beau safely get out, that brutal shootout completely massacres the Braithwaite family bloodline, leaving the massive manor totally abandoned in the ashes by 1709, where a small fishing community eventually builds itself right on top of the ruins along the docks. But here's where the real-world lore gets insanely interesting, because Lemoyne is heavily based on Louisiana, and the manor itself is an incredible near one-to-one recreation of two real historic landmarks and slavery museums, the Oak Alley Plantation and the Homus House Plantation. Braithwaite Manor visually leans heavily on Oak Alley, famously named for its iconic, gorgeous row of southern live oak trees that actually existed long before the modern mansion was even ever built. It's a National Historic Landmark recognized for its stunning architecture, landscaping, and incredibly for the historic innovation of grafting pecan trees done back in 1846 by an enslaved gardener named Antoine. The real-life drama of Oak Alley is basically a video game story all on its own. Originally owned by Valcour Aime, the wealthy king of sugar, it was traded to his brother-in-law, Jacques Ramon, who tragically died of tuberculosis. His son, Henry, desperately tried to save it, but the Civil War destroyed its economic viability, forcing the family to sell it off at auction to John Armstrong. By the 1920s, it fell into complete disrepair, became a cattle ranch under Andrew Stewart, saw sugarcane return in the 1960s, and was finally turned over to a foundation in 1972 to become a public museum. On the flip side, the game also pulls massive inspiration from Homus House, which started as a beef and mutton farm before John Burnside bought it in 1858 and turned it into an absolute sugar empire, amassing one of the largest estates in America by 1881. Just like the Braithwaites losing their iron grip on Lemoyne, the occupying family in the 1920s had to tragically sell the plantation off piece by piece, until it was finally purchased and beautifully restored in 2003 by Kevin Kelly, who opened it for public tours while still using it as his own private residence. With the sheer amount of heavy, dramatic Louisiana history baked into these two real-world plantations, it's no surprise that Rockstar used them as the foundation for the Braithwaite Mansion, creating a deep, historical connection that perfectly defines the atmosphere for the entire game. I explained the Gertrude Braithwaite's mystery and everything related to her in detail in my last video on RDR2, but what happens if you visit her years later as John Marston? Well, if you actually take the time to ride all the way back down to the burnt-out ruins of the Braithwaite property in the year 1907 during the epilogue, you're going to discover one of the darkest, most depressing pieces of environmental storytelling in the entire game. When you approach that creepy, isolated outhouse sitting on the edge of the woods, you'll immediately notice that something is horribly wrong. The heavy iron chains and massive padlocks are still tightly wrapped around the rotting wooden door, but the swamp is completely silent. The terrifying, unhinged screaming and counting that used to echo through the trees is totally gone. If you walk up and peer through the tiny crescent moon hole carved into the door, you'll be met with a truly gruesome sight. You won't see a living woman anymore, but rather the skeletal remains of Gertrude Braithwaite slumped on the floor. When Arthur and the gang violently assaulted the manor back in Chapter 4, burning it to the ground and completely wiping out the matriarch, Catherine Braithwaite, and her sons, it created a horrifying butterfly effect. With the entire family massacred or scattered to the wind, there was no one left alive who would know about her or could secretly bring her food and water out in the woods. Gertrude was completely forgotten, tragically left to starve to death, locked inside her own tiny wooden prison. To make the discovery even more grim, John Marston will actually take out his notebook and draw a haunting sketch of her skeleton right into his journal, officially marking the pathetic, tragic final end of the once powerful Braithwaite bloodline. If you're riding through the Heartlands and happen to spot a stranded woman whose horse just died by the side of the road, you can't ignore her, because offering her a ride to Emerald Ranch actually unlocks the darkest, most complex, unsolved true crime mystery in the entire game. During the ride, she'll start spilling the tea about the area's gloomy, oppressive atmosphere and the notoriously domineering ranch owner, Eugene Wegner. She'll eventually direct your attention toward the completely abandoned saloon on the property, and if you actually walk up and push those unlocked doors open, you'll step into a literal, untouched crime scene. Inside, you'll find a massive, dark bloodstain on the floorboards to the left of the bar, smashed beer bottles indicating a brutal, chaotic struggle, and exactly 3 bullet holes blasted into the far right wall in a tight, triangular grouping. To make the sinister cover-up even more ridiculously obvious, if you walk out the back door and head immediately to the right, you'll find a lonely, hidden tombstone that suspiciously claims the victim was accidentally shot, which is an incredibly hard story to believe when there's a massive bar fight and 3 distinct gunshots. The stranded woman will also tell you the tragic tale of Miriam Wegner, the owner's daughter, who used to roam the property but is now permanently confined to the main house. If you pull out your binoculars and stare at the second-story window at exactly noon or midnight, you can actually see Miriam's pale, ghostly figure staring blankly out at the ranch. The lore gets insanely deep if you ride up near Fort Wallace and loot an abandoned mail cart, where you'll find scattered letters addressed to Miriam, revealing that the man murdered in the saloon was actually her secret lover, Joshua Burgess. Another letter describes her father, Eugene, as wildly domineering, painting a terrifying picture of a traumatized girl trapped in her own home by a horrific family secret. This massive web of environmental clues has sparked some of the wildest, deeply researched theories in the Red Dead community about who actually pulled the trigger and orchestrated this massive cover-up. The most prominent theory points the finger straight at Eugene Wegner himself. The assumption is that the controlling father hated that his daughter was seeing Joshua, so he had him brutally executed in the saloon, gave it that fake, accidentally shot excuse on his grave, and locked Miriam in the house forever, so she could never see another man again. However, another extremely strong theory that is constantly gaining steam points the finger directly at Eugene's son, Eugene the Younger. He's notoriously hot-headed, and if Arthur continuously antagonizes him around the ranch, the son will completely lose his mind and scream, "You don't think I'll kill ya? I've killed before." And if you actually shoot him and loot his body, he drops a surprisingly powerful pistol that could easily be the murder weapon. But if family drama isn't enough for you, some players heavily suspect Seamus, the guy who runs the game's very first fence operation right behind the Emerald Ranch bar. During a story mission, Hosea casually mentions that Seamus was sweet for the owner's daughter, giving the shady criminal a terrifying, deeply jealous motive to eliminate his romantic rival in a bar fight. Even the hidden in-game dialogue heavily implies that a massive income driving Emerald Ranch has a completely sketchy past, leading fans to wonder if Eugene Wegner is secretly running a massive illicit enterprise, doing business with dangerous people who help him keep the ranch's darkest, bloodiest secrets buried forever. While everyone is entirely obsessed with the moving narrative and massive cinematic shootouts, there is a completely overlooked low-stakes mechanic that actually unlocks arguably the most overpowered, game-altering item in the entire game. I'm talking about the brutal, slow-burn grind of the camp's hunting and crafting system, the ultimate prize, the Legend of the East Satchel. Now, a satchel might not sound as flashy as a rare golden revolver or a fast horse, but this thing is an absolute game changer. Normally, Arthur is severely limited in what he can carry, forcing you to constantly leave valuable loot behind or frantically run back to a fence to empty your pockets. While the standard camp upgrades only slightly boost your capacity for one specific category of items, unlocking the Legend of the East Satchel permanently skyrockets your carrying capacity for every single item type in the game to 99. You essentially become a walking general store, completely eliminating the stress of inventory management forever, so you can just focus on exploring. But getting your hands on it is an unforgiving nightmare of a challenge. First, you have to shell out a massive chunk of your hard-earned camp funds just to buy Pearson his leatherworking tools. Then you have to painstakingly craft every single other satchel upgrade in the game before the final recipe even unlocks. This means you have to track down ultra-rare, flawless 3-star animals across the entire map, including badgers, iguanas, and terrifying predators like cougars and wolves. You have to use the exact right weapon and land perfect, clean headshots or neck shots, because even one slightly sloppy bullet will completely ruin the pelt and force you to start that hunt all over again. In any other video game, an upgrade this massively powerful would be locked behind the final story boss or an intense endgame grind, but Rockstar brilliantly hid the best quality of life item in the entire game behind a quiet, expansive hunting simulator. It's the flex for completionists, massively rewarding the dedicated players who actually take the time to slow down, pull out their bow, and master the wilderness. There's an unspoken rule in RDR2. If you find these items, you should sell them to get some quick money. And then you quickly realize you just made the biggest mistake of your entire playthrough. I am, of course, talking about the beautiful but incredibly frustrating egrets, specifically the reddish, little, and snowy egrets. If you're wandering through the foggy, alligator-infested marshlands of Bayou Noir in Lemoyne, these rare birds are an absolute goldmine for the early game. If you pull out your varmint rifle to ensure you don't ruin the carcass, you can sell a whole, unskinned, snowy egret to the butcher for a solid $5, while its individual sells for $1.50 each. The best sweet spots to farm them are the clearing just about 30 feet into the swamp east of the Kamasa River Railroad Bridge, the muddy riverbanks north of Caliga Hall, the tiny islands scattered around Lagras, or directly south of the Western Train Bridge leading into St. Denis. They're most active during the day, especially in the early morning between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. If you're having terrible luck finding them, you can use a classic speedrunner trick. Just save your game and immediately reload it to force the area's spawns to completely refresh. But here's the massive catch that every veteran player secretly knows. You need 5 of each of these specific plumes for the infamous Duchess and Other Animals exotic quest given by Algernon Wasp later in Chapter 4. Rockstar actually programmed a brutal, hidden extinction mechanic into the game. The exact second you officially accept this quest, the spawn rates for these specific birds completely plummet off a cliff, making them nearly impossible to find. If you want to save your absolute sanity and hours of riding around the swamp getting eaten by gators, the pro tip is to hunt down and hoard at least 5 plumes of every egret type long before you ever officially start this mission. If you want to pull off the perfect crime, you need to exploit the insane synergy between Alden, the road station clerk, and Seamus, the shady fence at Emerald Ranch. The trick is to visit Alden or Hector up in Strawberry and purchase their coach robbery tips. These specific missions guarantee that you'll intercept a stagecoach carrying a locked strongbox filled with cash and valuable jewelry. But here's where the double dip strategy comes in. First, you completely loot the strongbox, walking away with usually 25 to 50 bucks in loose cash plus items, and then, instead of just running away, you actually drive the empty, stolen stagecoach directly into Seamus's barn at Emerald Ranch for an additional easy 25 to 40 bucks. Seamus is a businessman though, so he pays strictly based on the quality and type of the vehicle, flat out refusing to buy broken wagons or cheap, simple carts. He'll usually toss you 15 bucks for basic buggies, 25 for larger commercial wagons, and top dollar, often $40 for fully enclosed stagecoaches. Just don't bother bringing him those massive oil wagons. While they're great for story missions, he won't touch them for his fence business. If you want to farm this system and become insanely rich, the most efficient strategy in the entire game is to literally just wait on the main dirt road right next to the Heartland oil fields, just south of Emerald Ranch. The second you see a passing stagecoach or large wagon, you hijack it and drive it straight into Seamus's barn, where the massive doors will automatically swing open for you. Because you're operating right next to the drop-off point, you can effortlessly move multiple wagons per day without dealing with those painfully long travel times. But there are some crucial rules you have to follow if you want this to work. You gotta remember to pull your bandana up before stealing a coach, because getting hit with a massive bounty will completely negate your profits. Also, if you catch the attention of the law and have an active wanted level, Seamus will completely lock his doors and refuse to do business with you until the heat totally dies down. And finally, if you're strictly trying to maintain a high honor run, just be aware that constantly stealing wagons is a heavily dishonorable act, so you're gonna have to spend a lot of time walking around St. Denis, cheerfully greeting every single person you see, just to make up the difference. My favorite thing to do in RDR2 is find treasure maps scattered across the map, and then you realize that some of them lead to insane payouts that set you up for the rest of the game. If you want to become completely filthy rich without grinding stagecoach robberies, you need to track down the Landmarks of Riches treasure map. This specific treasure hunt was actually a PC exclusive secret back in late 2019. But Rockstar eventually blessed console players by adding it in the Moonshiners update. It's a massive cross-map scavenger hunt that takes you to some of the weirdest points of interest in the game. Here is exactly how to follow the clues and claim the prize. To kick off this massive hunt, you need to ride far northwest of Oangela in West Elizabeth, right up against the extreme western edge of the map. Slightly southwest of the Trapper, you'll find a bizarre, ancient-looking obelisk standing out in the wilderness. If you walk up and closely examine the plaque on the side of the monument, Arthur will discover a hidden compartment containing the very first map. When you open that first map, you'll see a super creepy drawing of the Hand of God, reaching down from the clouds and pointing directly at a church bell. This is a massive hint pointing you all the way across the map to the swampy bayous of Lemoyne. You need to head to the infamous tiny church hidden in the Lakay swamps, carefully climb onto the roof, and you'll find the second map stashed up by the bell. The second map is a bit trickier, but it points you toward the Grizzlies. You need to ride up to the mysterious hill home, which is that awesome grassy hobbit-style house built straight into the hillside, walk around the exterior of the house, and inspect the strange windows to pull the third map out of the wooden frame. The third map gives you a drawing of a broken cannon and a tree with a dark hole in its trunk. You're heading back down south to Bulger Glade, the massive abandoned Civil War battlefield in Lemoyne. Look for a small hill surrounded by a defensive trench near a ruined cannon. Check your map and stand just south of the letter L in the word Glade. Reach your hand inside the hollowed-out trunk to grab the final map. The final map points you toward the prize. You need to ride all the way back west, just north of Strawberry, and climb to the freezing peak of Mount Shan. At the very top, you'll find a strange, mysterious rock sundial. If you search under the rocks right at the base of this sundial, you'll hit the absolute jackpot. You don't just get 1 or 2 gold bars, you're rewarded with a staggering 6 gold bars. You can take these to any fence in the game and sell them for an immediate, life-changing payout of $3,000, making this arguably the most profitable treasure hunt in the entire Wild West. Did you know that there's a secret hidden in the Rhodes Gunsmith's basement that many fans pass without even noticing? And it's honestly one of the most disturbing, heartbreaking hidden encounters in the entire game. You don't even need a specific mission to trigger this. As early as Chapter 2, if you walk around to the south side of the Rhodes Gunsmith building instead of just walking through the front door, you'll notice a tiny barred window right at ground level. If you get close enough, a young boy dressed in a weird little sailor suit named Samson will frantically call out from the shadows, begging and pleading for someone to help him escape. To actually save him, you have to storm right through the front doors of the shop, pull your gun, aim it directly at the owner, Josiah, and select the special Draw to Basement prompt. A terrified Josiah will slowly lead you downstairs into a deeply unsettling, dimly lit room, completely decorated like a child's nursery, where you'll find the poor boy literally chained to a bed. If you actually take a second to listen to Josiah, instead of immediately pulling the trigger, the dark intersection of grief and madness gets incredibly tragic. He tearfully confesses that years ago, he was teaching his actual son, Sam, how to shoot down by the Kamasa River, but the boy tragically fell into the rushing water and drowned, completely consumed by grief and totally unable to accept reality. Josiah eventually snapped, kidnapped a local boy who vaguely resembled his dead child, and violently forced him into his late son's sailor clothes just to replace him. To free the terrified kid, you just have to carefully shoot the heavy iron shackle off his leg. Just make sure your aim is steady and you don't accidentally shoot the boy. Doing this gives you a massive boost to your honor, but the absolute best part is the insane loot hidden in the room. Before you leave the basement, you must open the shiny weapon case sitting in the corner, because it contains a free Lancaster repeater, easily one of the most accurate and powerful rifles in the entire game, completely saving you from having to spend your hard-earned cash on it later. You can also rob the shop's cash register on your way out, and the game gives you total freedom on how to handle Josiah's fate. You can kill him, hogtie him, or just walk away. If you actually let him live and return to the shop a few days later, he will still be running the store, but he's completely broken, visibly distraught, and will often offer Arthur a heavy discount out of pure fear and guilt, even as his dialogue becomes increasingly unhinged and unstable. Just be warned, the game world moves on without you. If you totally ignore that window and never trigger the rescue, the boy will eventually disappear from the basement entirely, heavily implying a deep end to this dark mystery. You can also rob gunsmiths, and the St. Denis Gunsmith is probably your best bet if you're looking to pull off the high-stakes heist without catching a massive bounty. Because St. Denis has the highest police density in the entire game, you have to execute this robbery perfectly, fast, and completely quiet. Your first step is to walk all the way to the back of the gunsmith shop and knock on the heavy wooden security door. A sketchy guard will slide open a tiny slot, take one look at Arthur and aggressively tell you to get lost. Once you confirm the illegal activity is happening, march right back into the front counter, pull your gun on the shopkeeper, and select the special "Rob Back Room" prompt. The terrified owner will lead you back, knock on the door, and convince the guard to open up. Here is the absolute most crucial part. The exact second that door swings open, you have to instantly melee the guard to knock him out silently. If you panic and accidentally pull the trigger, the gunshot will immediately alert the massive police force outside. Once the guard is out cold, sprint up the stairs where you'll interrupt a massive illegal high-stakes poker game. Don't just greedily snatch the $50 in cash scattered on the table. Keep your gun raised and aggressively threaten the wealthy players. Eventually, one of them will completely crack under the pressure and open a hidden wall safe for you, revealing a highly valuable golden nugget and a thick stack of extra cash. Before you make your grand escape, don't forget to clean out the gunsmith's front register on your way out for an easy extra $20 to $30. Just be warned, unlike the Rhodes or Valentine backroom robberies, there's no secret, unique weapon hidden back there. The main draw is purely the massive cash and gold payout. And whatever you do, don't take too long or leave loose ends, because if you leave the gunsmith untied at the bottom of the stairs, he will eventually bolt out the front door and fetch the police, completely ruining your perfect silent heist. And finally, Valentine's doctor can also be robbed. And if you want to pull this one off successfully, you need to treat it like a chaotic, high-stakes smash and grab, because the local law enforcement is heavily scripted to swarm the building almost immediately after you enter that back room. To trigger this hidden heist, you first need to wander around to the back exterior of the doctor's office, near the stables, and peer through the small, barred window, where you'll spot a sketchy O'Driscoll and a woman counting massive stacks of illicit money. Now, with this knowledge, march right through the front door, pull your weapon on the terrified doctor, and hit the special "Rob Back Room" prompt. He'll nervously lead you to the heavy security door and trick them into opening it. The exact second that door swings open, things go completely sideways, as the O'Driscolls instantly draw their weapons. So you need to activate Deadeye and quickly take out the 3 armed men inside. Once the room is clear, you have to prioritize your loot fast. Immediately grab the shiny weapon case sitting right on the table. It contains the Schofield revolver, which is completely free and easily one of the best sidearms in the entire game. If you already own one, picking this up gives you a second one, letting you dual-wield matching Schofields insanely early in Chapter 2. After securing the gun, snatch the loose cash pile off the table and look at the wall safe. If you brought dynamite, chuck a stick at it and blow the heavy iron door off its hinges for an easy extra $50 to $100. But don't get greedy and try to fight the massive wave of lawmen pouring through the front door. Just turn around, sprint straight out the back door, jump on the horse that you hopefully parked right there, and make a blazingly fast getaway toward the Heartlands. Also, remember 2 crucial rules. Always tie your bandana up over your face before walking in to minimize your unavoidable bounty, and whatever you do, do not shoot the poor doctor. If you leave him alive and unharmed, he'll simply go back to happily serving as the town's physician the second the heat finally dies down, leaving you with an epic new gun and a pocket full of cash. Strawberry might seem like a quiet, boring little logging town, but the overly cheerful Mayor Nicholas Timmons is actually hiding one of the most brilliant, subtle pieces of environmental storytelling regarding the strict social taboos of 1899. If you hang around the town square, you'll constantly hear the mayor giving these grand public speeches, loudly bragging about his beloved wife and how they moved away from the East Coast because her family was unkind to her. But if you actually eavesdrop on the local gossip from the woman standing near the general store, they'll whisper that no one in town has ever actually seen this mysterious woman. To uncover the massive cover-up, you have to do something a bit ruthless. knock the mayor out and loot his pockets. You'll find a hidden letter from his sister, Belinda, that completely shatters his fake public persona, explicitly stating, "You never married." The letter references a massive scandal, a terrible business back at Princeton University involving a fellow professor named Belrose, and she expresses relief that Nicholas finally found a remote place where he can safely be who he is without the harsh judgment of high society. But the absolute best part is how this ties into the Strawberry Welcome Center. The refined guy running the hotel, Beauchamp, seems completely out of place in a rugged mountain town, but he'll casually mention that he was a colleague of the mayor's back east, and that Timmons personally convinced him to move there. The mayor is almost always found near the Welcome Center rather than at a private residence, heavily implying that Beauchamp is either Belrose himself or a new partner, and that the mayor literally built this remote safe haven just so he could live near the man he loves under the fake guise of a professional relationship. To make it even more immersive, if you hang around the mayor for too long or confront him, his usually cheerful dialogue becomes incredibly nervous and defensive, and terrified that a rough outlaw like Arthur is going to completely unravel his carefully constructed double life. If you think you've seen all the dark, depressing environmental storytelling this game has to offer, the terrifying tragedy of Clawson's Rest is going to completely blow your mind. Located just across the Dakota River, northwest of Valentine, you'll stumble upon an eerily quiet, completely locked cabin that forces you to brutally smash a window or shoot off the heavy padlock just to get inside. The second you step through the door, you're hit with a heart-wrenching scene. The skeletal remains of two young children, Iva and Claude, lying dead in their beds, surrounded by desperately emptied food cans. If you take a second and loot the room for a hidden map and some minor valuables, you'll eventually find a crumpled letter left on the table by their mother, Ellen, and the dark irony of the situation will completely crush you. She explains that their father is away, and she is leaving to track down the ruthless thieves who robbed them of their last $50, strictly instructing her kids to heavily bolt the door and never open it for anyone. Because these poor kids followed her instructions flawlessly, they locked themselves inside and slowly starved to death, waiting for a mother who was never coming back. But the most insane part of this mystery is that Rockstar actually lets you solve what happened to Ellen during the Chapter 2 home robbery mission with Javier Escuela. If you carefully sneak up on the barn at the Chez Porter farm before going in guns blazing, you can secretly overhear the Twisted Hillbilly residents mocking a crazy woman who recently marched onto their land, accusing them of theft. They casually laugh about how the twisted father of their clan brutally murdered her and buried her out in the woods. This chilling piece of overheard dialogue completely confirms that Ellen successfully tracked down the Porters, but was executed before she could get her money, directly causing the slow, terrifying death of her children. It completely changes the entire emotional weight of that specific companion mission. When you finally pull your guns and clear out Chez Porter, you aren't just robbing a rival gang for camp funds anymore. You're delivering brutal Wild West justice for an entirely wiped out family. And then there's the terrifying ghost of Pleasance, sitting quietly on the murky outskirts of Bayonnois. This decrepit, rotting settlement feels deeply unsettling the second you ride in. But the true horror isn't that the town was abandoned, it's that the residents never actually left. If you carefully walk through the overgrown, foggy cemetery hidden behind the buildings, you'll make a completely jaw-dropping discovery. Every single tombstone in that graveyard lists the exact same date of death, September 17th, 1883. The engraved causes of death include brutal stabbings and point-blank gunshots, completely confirming that whatever happened that day wasn't a peaceful exit, but an absolute coordinated massacre. By the time Arthur rides through in 1899, the town has been dead for nearly 16 years. But Rockstar left behind an insane trail of hints to piece together. If you inspect the rotting welcome sign on the edge of town, it proudly states Pleasance was founded in August of 1883, meaning this entire community survived for barely a single month before being violently wiped off the map. This completely insane timeline has sparked some massive, wildly detailed theories in the community. The first major theory revolves around a deadly outbreak, because if you look closely at the boarded up doors and shattered windows, you'll see terrifying, ominous graffiti screaming things like unclean with sin, ill with sin, and stay out plague. Some players believe a horrific, novel disease rapidly spread and ripped through the settlement, and the brutal gunshots were either desperate mercy killings or an aggressive quarantine enforcement by outsiders trying to stop the spread. But if you look closer at the town's architecture, things get more sinister. If you step inside the abandoned church, you'll notice an incredibly creepy detail. There is zero religious iconography. There are no crosses, no stained glass angels, and no established religious symbols anywhere in the entire town. Because Rockstar is so heavily obsessed with historical accuracy, this deliberate omission has convinced massive chunks of the fanbase that Pleasance was actually a secret haven for devil worshippers and occult activity. Proponents of this dark theory believe the sinful graffiti points to the town either destroying itself in a massive, violent satanic ritual, or that angry, God-fearing outsiders from the nearby town of Rhodes rode in and completely exterminated the unsavory cult. Of course, because the town closely borders the terrifying swamps, some players immediately try to blame the savage night folk, but the forensic evidence completely debunks that theory. The night folk strictly use silent weapons like machetes and bows, never firearms, and they're notorious for stealing bodies to create gruesome, bloody displays hanging in the trees, meaning they would never take the time to respectfully bury their victims and carve individual tombstones. Ultimately, we may never get a fully confirmed answer on exactly why this town was completely slaughtered in under 30 days, but that's the absolute brilliant beauty of Red Dead Redemption 2's world building. Just like real-world true crime, some horrific cold cases never get wrapped up with a neat little bow, leaving us to endlessly obsess over the terrifying, bloody clues left behind in the dirt. For years, players have heavily praised Arthur Morgan's tragic tuberculosis diagnosis as one of the most masterful, emotional storytelling devices in gaming history. But Hauser recently revealed that this heartbreaking plot twist was actually deeply, painfully personal. He explained that his own grandfather contracted TB right after Dan's father was born, entirely before modern antibiotics were even available. His grandfather was incredibly lucky to barely survive the disease, considering the devastating reality that out of the 35 patients being treated in his ward, only 3 actually lived. Learning about this dark family history completely fascinated Hauser, specifically the terrifying nature of the disease itself. Because TB leaves patients functional for extended periods while slowly draining their strength, it creates a very specific, agonizing kind of tragedy, where the victim has enough time to actively confront their own mortality and deeply reflect on their life choices. That exact characteristic is what made it the perfect plot point for Arthur's redemption arc, giving him the agency to desperately try and accomplish meaningful things while painfully aware that his body is deteriorating by the day. But the revelations didn't stop there. Hauser also dropped some insane cut content, revealing that Arthur originally had a baby who was supposed to tragically die right at the very beginning of the game. And if you love diving into the creepy, supernatural lore, Hauser finally stepped up and officially confirmed the most massive fan theory in the entire franchise regarding the cryptic strange man, confirming that the mysterious top hat wearing figure is literally meant to be a direct manifestation of your shadow, your karma, and essentially the devil himself. As if this wasn't enough, Hauser bluntly admitted that the behind-the-scenes development of RDR2 was actually a chaotic nightmare. The massive project was drastically behind schedule and wildly over budget to a degree that terrified him, creating immense, crushing pressure on the team as deadlines slipped and costs completely skyrocketed. They were desperately trying to create an emotionally challenging masterpiece while facing heavy skepticism from doubters who thought the game would completely fail. But instead of becoming a tragic cautionary tale of overambitious development hell, the team pushed through their immense personal struggles and completely shattered expectations, somehow emerging from that total chaos to deliver what will forever go down in history as one of the greatest, most critically acclaimed gaming masterpieces ever made. If you've searched every inch of the map, you must have seen this blind man, and he looks suspicious from the get-go. Fans have thrown some wild theories on who this guy might be, and it's totally insane. When you toss a coin to blind man Cassidy, he doesn't just give you generic fortune teller nonsense. He's actually dropping the most massive, perfectly accurate lore bombs in the entire franchise. The first time you meet him, he tells Arthur, quote, $1 for your future, $1 for your fate, and promises to see only true things, meaning if you're willing to generously help someone expecting nothing in return, you unlock the ability to see the tragic truths Arthur is completely blind to. When Cassidy tells him to be a fool for love, he's directly calling out how Arthur suppressed all of his own emotions for Dutch's strict outlaw ethos, tragically losing his young girlfriend, his son, Mary Linton, and even passing up a relationship with Abigail just to stay loyal to the gang. As the story gets darker, Cassidy urgently warns, "You didn't run from last we spoke, sir. You didn't run far enough." Arthur was already noticing Dutch's reckless leadership and the fact that Micah was clearly a rat. You can literally find Dutch's wanted poster hidden right in Micah's camp, but Arthur just kept blindly obeying orders. The blind man brilliantly sees through Arthur's tough exterior, stating, "You are not who you think you are, sir," which is lucky, because Arthur was dragged into this violent life at just 14 years old. He genuinely believes he's a terrible man who doesn't deserve good things. But Cassidy confirms the true goodness in his heart. The prophecies get terrifying as the gang completely falls apart. Cassidy states, "It's no use hoping. Your father is seduced by the one with the forked tongue," which perfectly describes Dutch, the father figure, being completely corrupted by the manipulative, snake-like Micah, ruining everything Arthur and Hosea built. The warnings soon turn deadly when Cassidy chillingly predicts, surrounded by fields of fire and flesh, the devil will make his sacrifice, exactly mirroring the chaotic Cornwall oil fields mission, where Dutch literally leaves Arthur to die. He even predicts Arthur's terminal illness, warning that the man with no nose is coming for you, meaning the Grim Reaper of tuberculosis is finally knocking. Yet the most tragic and beautiful prophecy is, even when all reason is lost and all truth has become a lie, you will stand firm, for loyalty is both your saving and your curse. Arthur's stubborn loyalty ultimately leads him to his death, but it is also his salvation. If he hadn't stayed behind to confront Dutch and Micah, the Pinkertons' ambush would have wiped out everyone, including John's family. Cassidy promises that Arthur's life of regret can, quote, end better than it began, and as Arthur uses his dying breaths to ensure John escapes, he proudly screams, "John made it," finally learning what truly matters. But Cassidy doesn't just stop at Arthur. If you find him in the epilogue, he drops 3 insane quotes that completely foreshadow the entire plot of the first game. He warns John that his past is preventing his future change, and chillingly states, "They will come for you, friend, and when they do, you will not have a choice. He flawlessly predicts the arrival of two specific men. The first is Edgar Ross, the bitter Pinkerton looking for bloody revenge against the remaining gang members, and the second is an entity from another world, the Strange Man. This perfectly sets up that iconic, terrifying encounter in the first game where the Strange Man grades John's soul, cryptically calling himself an accountant and telling John that his gravesite is a fine spot, proving that Blind Man Cassidy was literally reading the entire franchise's script from the very beginning. One of the creepiest enemy types players encounter during the game is Murphy Brood, and then you quickly realize that these guys are a terrifying nightmare that makes the O'Driscolls and Lemoyne Raiders look like a bunch of harmless boys. Unlike other rival gangs that are motivated by politics, territory, or money, these deeply inbred mountain men are driven by nothing but predatory nihilism and extreme stomach-turning sadism. They completely rule the dark, unsettling woods of Roanoke Ridge over in New Hanover, operating out of a massive, terrifying cave system called Beaver Hollow that they violently seized after slaughtering an entire group of innocent miners. If you make the mistake of setting up a wilderness camp in their territory early in the game, you'll trigger one of the creepiest random encounters ever. Two of these creeps will emerge from the pitch-black shadows, walk right up to your fire, and deliver a chilling warning that you're trespassing in their country. If you ignore them or dare to camp there again, they will ambush you without hesitation. What makes the Murphy Brood so incredibly dangerous is that their ambush tactics are straight out of a psychological horror movie. They don't just stand in the middle of the road and shoot you, they actively use the environment to completely trap you. You might be riding along and hear a woman frantically crying or spot a body lying in the dirt, but the exact second you step off your horse to investigate, the ground will literally collapse beneath you, dropping Arthur into a massive, hidden, spiked pit while they rain bullets down from the trees. They're notorious for rolling flaming wagons down steep hills to block your path and spook your horse before rushing you with rusty machetes. If you ever see a mutilated body hanging by its neck from a tree branch, don't stop to look, because the second you do, they'll spring from the bushes. By the later chapters, they get so bold that they'll even set up a devastating Maxim Gatling gun deep in the woods for a lethal attack. When you finally have to raid their Beaver Hollow home in chapters 5 and 6, the environmental storytelling is just pure nightmare fuel. The entire cave system is grotesquely decorated with mutilated human remains, and you'll find terrified innocent travelers locked inside cages, waiting to be tortured. And yes, shooting off the locks to free them gives you a massive, well-deserved honor boost. While they definitely share that deeply creepy swamp monster vibe with the night folk down in the bayou, the Murphys are way more vocal, taunting you from the trees and heavily rely on firearms, whereas the night folk are dead silent and stick to primitive weapons. Because the Brood loves to swarm you in the dark, and can trigger a brutal one-hit kill animation if they get close enough with a machete, your absolute best combat strategy is to keep your distance and constantly keep a pump-action shotgun loaded with incendiary buckshot ready to drop them in their tracks. And if you're riding through Roanoke Ridge and see a tiny red enemy dot briefly flash on your minimap and then vanish, you're actively being stalked. It all perfectly ties into the nearby, deeply cursed settlement of Butcher Creek. While the locals there aren't officially in the gang, they share a very similar, unsettling genetic history and a violent hostility toward outsiders, making that entire upper right corner of the map a complete and total survival horror experience. If you thought the freezing, snow-covered peak of Mount Hagen was only important for that cinematic masterpiece of a final showdown with Micah Bell in the epilogue, you've completely missed one of the coolest hidden secrets in the entire game. Hidden near the summit in the Grizzly's west, there's a narrow, heavily claustrophobic mineshaft that most players just ride past during the chaos. To even get inside, you have to carefully navigate a terrifyingly narrow ledge, and once you step into those pitch-black tunnels, you must pull out your lantern just to see 2 feet in front of your face. If you brave the creepy, silent darkness and travel deep enough into the cave, you'll find a deeply unsettling message carved directly into the rock in a dark red color that looks exactly like dried blood or red chalk, reading "A fool on command." While most players assume this is just another piece of creepy, cryptic environmental graffiti left behind by a madman or ghost, it's actually a massive, fourth-wall-breaking secret. Rockstar brilliantly hid dozens of these world cheat codes all over the map, carved into frozen ice, tucked inside random desk drawers, and written on abandoned walls. And this specific bloody message is the key to unlocking absolute hilarity. If you pause the game, open your settings, and manually type that exact phrase into the secret cheats menu, you'll instantly toggle the completely chaotic drunk state. The exact second you activate it, Arthur or John will become instantly severely intoxicated. Your screen will start violently wobbling, your character will helplessly stumble all over the dirt, and you'll trigger some of the best, most hilarious, unique drunk dialogue in the entire game. It's incredibly fun to just mess around with in the middle of a massive gunfight or while trying to ride your horse, but you have to be warned about the massive progress halting catch. Just like every other manual cheat code in Red Dead Redemption 2, activating this will immediately disable all of your trophies and achievements, and the game will completely lock you out from saving your progress until you fully restart the game. The community also has a massive theory that RDR and Mafia share the same universe. At first glance, it sounds completely crazy, but the strongest evidence for this massive crossover comes straight from the actual development history of RDR2. In the early leaked maps and design stages, the bustling, foggy city of Saint Denis wasn't called Saint Denis at all. It was officially named New Bordeaux, as I mentioned earlier. Rockstar Games actually had to search for new names and completely change the name late in development to avoid massive corporate confusion, because Hangar 13 had already claimed the name New Bordeaux for their own fictionalized version of New Orleans in Mafia 3. But Rockstar actually missed a spot during the cleanup. If you sit around the camp at night and listen to the gang sing, they still perform a song specifically mentioning a town called Bordeaux, which fans know is a massive leftover audio file from before the frantic name change. The geographical and architectural similarities between the two games are staggering. Both titles offer a dark, deeply atmospheric, fictionalized version of New Orleans at two completely different points in history. Saint Denis gives us the muddy, totally different vibe of 1899 with its pristine French Quarter, while Mafia 3 shows the exact same city during the gritty, mob-run civil rights era of 1968. The state of Lemoyne mirrors Louisiana's geography so flawlessly that dedicated fans have literally taken Mafia 3's districts, like the massive bayou and the rural Sinclair Parish, and mapped them directly onto the RDR2 world map with terrifying one-to-one accuracy. This massive crossover theory is incredibly plausible from a business standpoint, because both Rockstar Games and Hangar 13 operate under the exact same powerhouse parent company, Take-Two Interactive. While the developers haven't officially confirmed they share a single timeline, mostly because Rockstar strictly uses fictional names like Liberty City, while the Mafia series occasionally name drops real-world cities like Chicago, the community loves the headcanon. The idea the muddy streets of Saint Denis slowly evolved over 70 years of fictional history into the muscle car-filled avenues of New Bordeaux means that Arthur Morgan and Lincoln Clay were literally shooting up the exact same swamps decades apart, making it the perfect crossover theory to feature in your next deep dive. For the last part of the video, we gotta talk about the elephant in the room. What will happen in Red Dead Redemption 3? What time period will it be set in, and who will be the main protagonist? Will they follow the same formula of making a prequel like they did with the previous game, or will they take the game in a totally new direction? Well, nothing's confirmed, but the fans have pointed out some serious theories, and honestly, they sound very interesting. Firstly, the one that I think has the most probability out of all the other theories is the one that Rockstar will again go back in time, this time letting players get a hold of the Calendar Boys. Throughout the game, the events of the Blackwater Massacre and Calendar Boys are mentioned to add a separate layer of importance to this certain event, and then you realize that they fit the whole situation pretty well for the next massive redemption arc. Because Mac and Davy Calendar die right before or during the chaotic opening of RDR2, their lives are completely shrouded in mystery. We know they joined up around 1898 and had a deeply vicious, violent reputation, but almost everyone in the Vanderlyn gang, except for the newer guys like Charles and Lenny, speak about them with massive respect and genuine affection. This creates the perfect, complex morality that Rockstar thrives on. Fans are heavily theorizing that Rockstar could shake up the franchise by introducing a dual protagonist system similar to Grand Theft Auto 5, allowing us to seamlessly swap between the brothers. You could play as Davy, the chaotic, reckless, gambling drunk, and then swap over to Mac, a brutal, heavy-hitting brawler who's secretly hiding a fiercely loyal, good heart beneath all that violence. Because they're established fighters and gamblers, they're already perfect for the established Red Dead gameplay loop. Taking this route would brilliantly complete a massive reverse trilogy for the franchise. I mean, think about it. RDR1 showed the tragic end of the Outlaws, RDR2 showed the heartbreaking downfall of the gang, and RDR3 would finally let us experience the Vanderlyn gang at the absolute peak of their golden era, exploring the true, untold origins of Dutch and Hosea. This means the climax of the entire game would be the start of the end of the Vanderlyn gang, the legendary, unseen Blackwater ferry heist. The game would throw you right into the middle of that disastrous, bloody shootout, finally showing us exactly what went wrong. When the ruthless Pinkerton agent Milton later brags to Arthur that he caught Mac and killed him, quote, slow but mercifully, people of Reddit are convinced Mac's death is a cover for a massive, heroic sacrifice. What if Mac pulled off one final selfless act of redemption, like giving up his own horse and holding off the Pinkertons, just so Arthur and John could escape the massacre? And if you want the most mind-blowing epilogue theory of all time, after the Calendar Boys meet their tragic end, the game would instantly hand you the reins to a younger Arthur Morgan. The epilogue would have you actually play through that desperate, frantic 3-day gap, desperately fighting your way out of Blackwater, and leading the shattered, terrified gang through the blinding blizzard, perfectly and seamlessly blending the final moments of RDR3 directly into the legendary opening cutscene of Red Dead Redemption 2. Although the Calendar Boys being the main protagonists might be the most realistic and safe theory, there is another wild idea that I do absolutely love. What if Rockstar went completely off the script with a totally different gang and a brand new set of characters? From the outside, it looks like a massive, terrifying gamble, but if anyone in the gambling industry is capable of pulling this off, it would be Rockstar Games. Let's be honest, the story of the Vanderlyn gang worked so perfectly in the first two games because we got to view their tragic downfall through two completely different, deeply personal perspectives. First with John, and then with Arthur. But stretching that exact same group of characters into a third, massive narrative runs the huge risk of feeling repetitive, potentially causing the legendary story to totally stagnate. To truly inject fresh life into the franchise, it would be a masterstroke to introduce us to a brand new, deeply flawed group of outlaws who are desperately seeking their own violent path to redemption. What makes this theory so insanely exciting is the massive possibility that RDR3 might not even be a traditional Old West game. If Rockstar decides to push the timeline slightly forward into the early 1920s, we would be completely leaving the dying frontier behind and stepping right into the gritty, violent world of Prohibition-era kingpins and massive bootlegging syndicates. It would give the entire franchise a completely fresh, high-stakes perspective while still perfectly maintaining that core Rockstar DNA of epic adventure and tragic redemption. But even if they decide to stay firmly rooted in the classic 1880s or 1890s time period, shifting the spotlight entirely away from Dutch's gang would open up a massive world of new possibilities. It would completely rejuvenate the series, allowing us to explore entirely new, unseen states and interact with a totally different breed of characters. We could even get answers to some of the massive, creepy mysteries and environmental lore introduced in the first two games, just viewed from a completely fresh perspective. Getting a brand new map packed with terrifying new mysteries and fresh, deeply written characters to fall in love with and inevitably get our hearts broken by is exactly what the franchise needs to stay groundbreaking. And the best part, moving on to a new crew doesn't mean we have to fully say a heartbreaking goodbye to our old friends. We could still easily run into a younger version of Arthur, John, Hosea, or Uncle as massive, mind-blowing cameos. It just means they won't be the center of the universe this time around, letting a brand new Red Dead legend take the stage. Honestly, this is a 50-50 scenario. Either this will work perfectly, or just flop so bad that people on the internet will troll Rockstar forever. And that's it for this video. If you loved it, be sure to check out Red Dead Redemption 2 Part 1, the video that is on your screen right now. Click it, and I'll see you guys there.